The faint scent of my wife's special massage oil was still rising from the bottle when I realized it wasn't meant for our marriage anymore. Still, I held it steady in my hand, pretending the truth didn't sting. As that sweet, musky smell curled into the air, it carried her betrayal louder than any text ever could. While the scent clung to my fingertips, I finally understood who she'd been saving it for. The same lingering aroma told me my wife thought I'd stay blind forever. That's when I swapped her oil for a formula that would reveal every lie she shared with him. Before the story begins, tell me, where are you watching from? I hope your day's gentle and calm. Please like, subscribe, and let's start our story together. David Cole moved slowly through the kitchen, the same way he had moved through this house for the last 23 years, methodical, calm, precise. He set 2 plates on the dining table, angling them the way Mia liked. The candles were already lit, flickering against the window glass, throwing soft golden reflections across the room. He'd cooked her favorite, herb-roasted chicken, garlic Duchess potatoes, a pan of sautéed green beans with lemon. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was trying to honor the one day that mattered to him, the day that always brought them back to center, their anniversary. But as the minutes stretched, silence filled the house in a way that felt too heavy, too sharp around the edges. He checked his watch again, 7:04 p.m. Then his phone blinked, a text from Mia. Sorry, long shift at the gym, don't wait up. Just that, no heart emoji. No apology that sounded like it came from her soul, no follow-up call saying she wished she could be home. Just a single sentence tossed his direction like an afterthought. David stared at the message for a long moment, thumb hovering, then lowering. Something inside him, something old and slow, tightened. Mia never missed their anniversary, not once. Even in the years when money was tight or they fought over stupid things like schedules and mismatched expectations, she always came home early on this day. She always tried. He stood there another moment, listening to the soft hiss of the candles. Something was off, deeply off. He blew out the candles, grabbed his keys, and stepped out into the cooling Austin evening. The drive to the gym was short, muscle memory easy. He knew Mia's schedule by heart. Knew the ways her days stacked on each other, knew that Wednesday nights were usually light. As he approached the building, the parking lot stretched out under the harsh fluorescent lights. Mia's silver SUV sat in its usual corner spot, clean, parked perfectly. That wasn't unusual. She was meticulous about how she kept her car. But what was unusual was the building itself. Dark, not a single interior light glowing behind the tinted front windows. The door was locked, the closed sign flipped early. No movement inside, no silhouettes, no cleaning crew, nothing. David's hands tightened around the steering wheel as he slowly circled the far end of the lot. That's when he saw it. A second vehicle tucked behind the dumpster area where the cameras didn't reach. A black Toyota Camry he didn't recognize. Windows tinted, engine cold. He pulled into a distant spot and killed his headlights, just sitting there, staring at the quiet building. His mind ran through possibilities, but each one felt thinner and thinner the longer he watched. Something inside him whispered the word he didn't want to say out loud. He waited there in the stillness, hoping she would walk out the front door and wave at him, annoyed he'd come. But the building remained silent, sealed, as if the night itself was holding a secret. He could have marched up, banged on the door, demanded answers. He had that right. He was her husband. But he didn't. Bursting in would be emotional, reckless. And David Cole wasn't a reckless man, not even when his chest felt like it was cracking. Instead, he shifted the car back into drive, eased away from the lot, and let the building shrink behind him. The ride home felt longer than it should have. Spring air drifted through the cracked window, but it didn't cool the simmering unease rising inside him. He kept replaying the last few weeks, small things he hadn't paid attention to. Mia coming home later than usual. Her phone flipped face down more often, her sudden obsession with private clients. The new perfume she claimed was a gift from one of her students. The way she avoided eye contact when asked simple questions. At the time, he labeled all of it as stress. Busy season. Too many training sessions. He gave her space because that's what partners do. Because he trusted her. But now, sitting in his driveway with the porch light casting long shadows across the yard, those little things snapped together in his mind like puzzle pieces falling into place. Inside, the dinner table looked like something out of a picture frame. Perfect, untouched, almost mocking. David stood there in the doorway, the silence clawing at him in a way he hadn't felt since the day his father died. It was the kind of silence that made you realize something was slipping away, and you didn't know when it started. He lowered himself into the dining chair and stared at Mia's empty seat. The uneasiness wasn't just suspicion anymore. It had weight, shape, breath. It settled around him like fog. David didn't move, didn't eat, didn't pour himself a drink. He just sat there, letting the truth he didn't yet want to name start whispering at the edges of his thoughts. And in that still room, he felt something shift inside him, quiet, cold, and irreversible. Something he knew he couldn't ignore anymore. Morning light crept through the bedroom blinds in thin, sharp lines, cutting across the floor like quiet reminders of the night before. David hadn't slept much. His mind had paced in circles until dawn, replaying Mia's text, the dark gym, the unfamiliar car. But when Mia burst out of the bathroom that morning, hair still damp from a rushed shower, she acted as if nothing in the world was out of place. "I've got early yoga clients," she said, tugging her sneakers on without looking his way. "I'm already running late." Her voice was clipped, practiced, already halfway out the door. David just watched her. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was clarity beginning to congeal. Something in her tone held impatience, as though home had become a burden rather than a refuge. She grabbed a tote bag off the dresser, stuffed with towels and lotion bottles. As she zipped it, something small slipped out from the side pocket and rolled onto the dresser with a soft click. A black bottle, no bigger than a travel shampoo container. Mia froze for half a second, glanced at it, then shoved it back into the tote. Too fast, too intentional. David didn't say a word. He only watched her hurry down the hallway, keys jingling before the front door slammed shut behind her. When the silence returned, heavier than before, he walked into the bedroom. Her tote bag was gone, but on the dresser sat another bottle, its twin. The same sleek black design, the same gold lettering. Private massage blend. He picked it up slowly, as if touching something intimate that didn't belong to him anymore. He unscrewed the cap and inhaled. The scent hit him immediately. Musky, warm, undeniably intimate. Not the eucalyptus blends she used for clients, not the lavender oils she applied before bed. This smelled like something meant for closeness, intimacy, skin on skin. Something meant for someone she wanted to impress. David's chest tightened, not with anger, but with that deep, hollow ache that comes when a truth you feared finally steps into the light. His hand shook slightly as he put the cap back on. The bottle felt heavier than it should, as if soaked in betrayal. He looked toward her vanity. A drawer was left slightly open, unusual for Mia, who treated every corner of her space like a showroom. He hesitated, the husband in him resisting the urge, the man in him insisting he already knew. He pulled the drawer open. Inside were receipts, folded neatly, tucked under a stack of fitness bands. He picked up the top one. A hotel day room, booked twice in the past month. Another receipt, another booking. Different day, same location. His breath left him in a slow exhale. He felt the weight of every quiet night he spent cooking dinner alone, every extra session she claimed she had, every sudden burst of energy she said came from new routines. Then, as if the universe needed to carve the final cut, Mia's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He shouldn't have looked, but he did. The screen lit up with a preview of the message, just long enough to read it before it faded. "Tonight at 7, bring the oil." David's throat tightened. His eyes stayed locked on the phone even after the screen went dark. That single line didn't just hint at betrayal. It spelled it out in ink so clear it might as well have been etched onto the walls. He felt something drain out of him then. Not rage, not fury, something quieter. Something that made his hands go cold. That feeling when you realize the life you thought you had has already been walking away from you long before you noticed its footsteps. He sat on the edge of the bed, the little black bottle still in his hand. He looked at it as if it were an object recovered from a crime scene, small, harmless, but screaming a truth no one wanted to say. He turned it once, twice, memorizing its exact angle. The cap placement, the label alignment. Then, with deliberate care, he placed it back on the dresser exactly the way Mia left it. Perfect position, perfect angle. No sign it had ever been touched, because if he confronted her now, she'd lie. If he asked questions, she'd evade them. If he showed his hurt, she'd bury it under excuses. No, not yet. David inhaled slowly, grounding himself. A man who'd spent decades solving mechanical problems understood something essential. You don't fix anything without fully understanding what's broken, and something in their marriage was broken deeper than he realized. He stood there in the stillness of the room, staring at the bottle glinting under the morning light, his confirmation sitting in plain sight, silent and damning. And as he stepped out of the bedroom, one thought followed him like a shadow. Tonight at 7. Whatever was happening, he would see it for himself. David waited until late morning before driving to Mia's gym. He didn't rush. He didn't storm in. He moved with the same controlled rhythm he used his whole life, as if any sudden motion might crack open the anger simmering just beneath his ribs. The building looked different in daylight. Bright signs, polished windows, upbeat music leaking faintly through the walls. A place that sold discipline, loyalty, transformation. The irony wasn't lost on him. He stepped inside, letting the cool blast of air conditioning wash over him. A young receptionist with a blonde ponytail smiled, with the kind of customer service brightness that didn't quite reach the eyes. "Welcome to FitForge. How can I help you today?" Before David could answer, a voice called from behind the counter. "I got this, Jess." The man who stepped forward was tall, lean, with a practiced smirk, and the kind of tan you only get from spending too much time shirtless in front of gym mirrors. Ethan Ross, the gym manager, the man Mia had spent last night with. David forced his expression into something neutral, polite even. It felt like tightening a bolt with bare hands, painful, necessary. Ethan extended a hand. "Hey there, I'm Ethan. You thinking about joining the FitForge family?" Family. The word tasted sour, but David shook his hand anyway. "Possibly," he said, keeping his voice even. "Just exploring my options. My wife uses this place sometimes. Thought I'd see what the fuss is about." Ethan's smile faltered for half a beat. Almost invisible, almost. But David caught it. The kind of flicker a man gives when he's not sure whether he's been caught or whether he just imagined the danger. "Well, we'd love to have you," Ethan said too quickly. "Let me give you the grand tour." He motioned for David to follow, and they moved past the treadmills and free weights. A couple of trainers nodded at Ethan as they passed, and he returned each gesture with that same confident grin. But David noticed the nerves, subtle but present, a tightness around the eyes, a slight shift in posture. Then something else caught David's attention. On Ethan's wrist, a bracelet, thin black leather with a small silver charm. He recognized it instantly, because he bought that bracelet for Mia 2 years ago on their anniversary trip to New Orleans. She wore it everywhere, until she suddenly didn't. Ethan noticed David staring and casually slid his hand into his pocket, as though adjusting keys. Too late. The image was burned into David's mind. They reached the back section of the gym where trainers prepped equipment. 2 employees were setting up mats, half listening as Ethan launched into a bragging tone. "So anyway," Ethan said, loud enough for the staff to hear, "you ever meet someone who just gets you, like sparks fly, makes coming to work exciting again?" The younger trainer chuckled knowingly. "Got yourself a special someone, boss?" Ethan smirked, trying to act coy, but he puffed up just enough to show he loved the attention. "Let's just say, someone keeps my evenings interesting." The trainers laughed. David didn't. He kept his face blank, steady. A lifetime of engineering discipline trained him to hold pressure without showing cracks. But inside, something was grinding. Not fiery, not explosive. Cold, controlled, like steel being reshaped. Ethan turned back to him, not realizing how much he'd revealed with those few careless lines. So, yeah, this section is for yoga and personal sessions. We get a lot of dedicated clients. Dedicated, another word that twisted itself inside David. He nodded politely. Looks like a good place. Ethan's shoulders relaxed, relieved. Yeah, we try. So what brings you in personally? New fitness goals? Looking to get back into a routine? David let the silence stretch for a moment, just long enough to make Ethan shift his weight. I'm thinking about changes, David said softly, trying to understand a few things in my life more clearly. Ethan's eyes flickered again. Well? Hey, we can help with that. New membership comes with a free assessment. I'll think about it. David turned before Ethan could say more, walking toward the exit with steps measured and deliberate. Every breath felt like holding back a tide. The gym's upbeat music felt mocking, like someone playing a parade over a funeral. As he pushed open the front door, the sunlight hit his face. Warm, steady. Completely at odds with the storm settling inside him. He didn't head home. He sat in his car for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel until the leather creaked. The bracelet, the bragging, the nervous smile. It was all there, every piece fitting into the shape of a truth he didn't want, but could no longer deny. His phone rested in the center console, screen dark. David picked it up, scrolling to a name he hadn't called in months. Rick Walters, longtime friend, chemist, the kind of man who knew how to solve problems without letting emotions lead. David pressed call. When Rick answered with his usual gravelly voice, David didn't ease into it. I need your brain, he said quietly. And the way he said it, it wasn't a request. It was the first step toward something he could no longer stop. The coffee shop was the kind of place David used to love. Warm lighting, mismatched wooden chairs, soft jazz humming in the background. Today, though, every detail felt sharp, too bright, too exposed. The smell of roasted beans sat heavy in the air as he slipped into a booth near the window. His hands folded together, steady but tense, like he was bracing himself for a truth he'd already swallowed. Rick arrived a few minutes later, pushing open the door with the same easy stride he'd had since their factory days. Older, grayer, a little thicker around the middle, but still sharp-eyed. The kind of man who noticed things other people missed. He approached the booth with a casual smile that faded the moment he saw David's face. What happened? Rick asked, sliding into the seat across from him. No small talk, no pretense, just concern. David exhaled slowly. Everything. He didn't wait. He didn't soften anything. He laid it all out. The long shift, the dark gym, the mystery car tucked behind the dumpsters, the black bottle with the intimate scent, the hotel receipts, the message telling Mia to bring the oil. And finally, Ethan, the bracelet, the bragging, the way the man's smile twitched under pressure. Rick didn't interrupt once. He just listened, hands clasped, jaw tightening with each new detail. When David finally stopped talking, the cafe's soft music felt like an insult to the weight sitting between them. That's the whole truth, David said quietly. Or, at least the part she didn't bother to hide. Rick leaned back, letting out a long breath. Damn, Dave. David nodded, staring at the grain of the wooden table. I'm not angry, he said, though his throat scratched when he said it. Not in the way I expected. It's like I'm outside of myself, watching it all play out. Rick studied him with a knowing look. That's because the anger hasn't decided where to go yet. David looked up, meeting Rick's eyes. What do I do? Confront her? Blow everything up? I don't want to scream. I don't want to throw things. That's not me. A slow smile spread across Rick's face. Not mocking, not cruel. Just thoughtful, calculating in a way only a chemist could manage. Good, he said. Then don't get angry. He leaned forward, voice lowering. Get creative. David blinked. Rick. No, listen, Rick said. You told me about that black bottle, massage oil, something she's clearly using with this clown. He paused, rubbing a hand over his jaw. You remember back at the plant, we had that quality check formula used on equipment? The one that reacted to friction and body heat? David's brow furrowed. The tracing gel, the stuff that turned colors under stress? Close, Rick said. I'm talking about the newer version. The smart dye blend the students at UT were testing last year. I helped run some of the early stability checks. He glanced around the cafe, lowering his voice further. It's completely clear when applied. No scent, no texture change. But once mixed with sweat, it activates, produces a bright neon pigment. David felt something stir inside him, something that wasn't anger or grief, something quieter, more deliberate. What color? He asked. Pink, Rick said, violently bright, impossible to miss. David exhaled, leaning back. And you're saying this stuff could be mixed into any oil-based solution? Rick said. Lotion, massage oils, even sunscreen. Once body heat hits it, the reaction triggers. And the more they sweat, he chuckled, the brighter it gets. David didn't smile, not yet. He wasn't thinking about revenge, not exactly. He was thinking about truth, visible, undeniable truth. Something they couldn't lie their way out of. Something he wouldn't have to argue about or prove. Is it safe? David asked, voice steady but low, as if crossing a line required ceremony. Rick nodded. Safe. Completely non-toxic. Washes off in a couple days. The embarrassment, though. He raised an eyebrow. That'll last a whole lot longer. David wasn't a cruel man. He wasn't vindictive, but he'd spent the last 24 hours drowning in a betrayal he didn't ask for. And now, for the first time since the anniversary dinner went cold, he felt a breath of control returning. Not retaliation, correction, truth delivered in a language that couldn't be twisted. He tapped a finger against the table, thinking, You still have access to that formula? Rick cracked a half smile. For you, I can get what you need. David nodded slowly. The cafe felt quieter, the air thicker, the world narrower, as if destiny itself had stepped closer to listen. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't clench his fists. He spoke with the calm of a man, choosing his path with full awareness of the consequences. All right, he said. Let's do this right. Rick leaned closer, voice almost a whisper. Then say it plainly, Dave. What do you want? David swallowed once, eyes steady. I want the truth, he said, in color. Rick grinned, pushing back from the table. Then you'll have it. But as David watched him stand, a quiet tension settled in his chest, because getting the truth meant facing whatever came after it, and he wasn't sure he was ready for that part yet. David drove home in the middle of the afternoon, sunlight flashing off passing cars, as if the world were going about its business, unaware that his was tilting off its axis. He practiced the cover story aloud once, twice, calm, casual, harmless. Forgot my wallet. Simple, believable. Nothing in his tone would hint at the plan forming inside him, a plan so delicate it required nerves steadier than any engineering job he'd ever handled. He parked in the driveway, listening for a moment to the ticking engine, letting his heartbeat settle. This wasn't anger. This was precision. As he entered the house, the familiar scent of Mia's citrus shampoo drifted down the hallway. The shower was running. Water hammered against tile in rhythmic bursts. He paused just long enough to make sure she hadn't heard him. No footsteps, no sudden silence. Good. He walked lightly toward the bathroom, every movement measured, deliberate. Steam seeped through the doorframe, warm and faintly scented. On the counter sat the black bottle, her private massage blend, the same one she planned to bring to her 7 o'clock meeting. Seeing it there, openly displayed, twisted something in his stomach. She trusted it wouldn't be touched, the same way she trusted he wouldn't look too closely. He pulled the door almost shut behind him, leaving just enough space to hear the water and her soft humming, a habit she had when getting ready for a client she liked. The sound, once familiar and comforting, felt cold now. David reached for the bottle. His fingers didn't shake, not once. He uncapped it slowly, lifting it to his nose just to confirm. The same intimate scent, musky and warm. He took out a small vial from his pocket. Rick's blend, clear, scentless. invisible until activated. He twisted open the black bottle and poured out half its contents into the sink. The oil slid away down the drain in a silent swirl, disappearing as easily as the excuses she'd given him over the past year. The sink water carried it off without a trace. He watched it vanish, feeling neither satisfaction nor sorrow, just an acceptance of what was necessary. Then he opened Rick's vial. The liquid inside didn't look like anything special. It caught the light only faintly, like clean water. But David knew better. This was a truth catalyst, a spotlight for hidden sins, a way to make betrayal unavoidably visible. He poured it carefully into the bottle, letting it blend naturally with the remaining oil. The mixture settled smoothly, no swirling, no separation. Rick had been right. It blended perfectly. When he tilted the bottle back and forth, it moved just like any other massage oil. He shook it gently, slow rotations rather than vigorous shaking, making sure to preserve the same consistency Mia expected. Then he held it up, examining the surface level, adjusting the cap slightly until the alignment matched exactly how it had been before. Everything had to be identical. No suspicion, no hint, no reason for her to rethink her plans. The shower continued running, water slapping against tile. He could vaguely hear Mia humming a tune she never hummed for him, and something in his chest tightened, not with jealousy, but with clarity. This wasn't about getting even. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about truth. If she wanted to live a double life, she'd have to confront it in daylight, not in shadows. David placed the bottle precisely where he found it, rotating it the final millimeter until it sat perfectly. He scanned the counter, no droplets out of place, no stray hair, no evidence he'd been there. Every detail mattered. 23 years of marriage had taught him her habits. 23 years of engineering had taught him how to make a flawless swap. The water shut off. His pulse kicked. He stepped back into the hallway, moving silently, timing each footstep to the creaks of the cooling pipes in the walls. He grabbed his keys from the table, slipping them into his pocket with the casualness of someone who truly had returned home for a forgotten wallet. He approached the front door just as he heard her flip open the shower curtain. Perfect timing. He opened the front door loudly enough for her to hear. "Forgot my wallet," he called out, projecting the exact tone of a man annoyed at his own forgetfulness. There was a beat of silence from the bathroom, barely a second, but noticeable. "Okay," Mia called back. "I'll be out in a minute." David smiled faintly, though no one could see it. He stepped out onto the porch, breathing in the afternoon air. Everything remained calm on the outside, the same peaceful neighborhood sounds drifting across the yard. The distant hum of lawnmowers, dogs barking 2 houses down, a delivery truck stopping at the corner. Behind him, inside that quiet house, the trap was now set. He walked to his car with steady, controlled steps, each one carrying the weight of a man who had finally taken his life back into his own hands. And as he pulled away from the driveway, he didn't look back. Tonight at 7, everything would begin to unfold. The house felt strangely peaceful that afternoon, almost unnaturally so, as if Mia were trying to scrub away every rough edge from the past few days. When David walked in from running errands, she met him in the kitchen with a sweetness he hadn't seen in months. She was humming again, lightly, the same soft tune she used to hum when she wanted something, or when she tried to hide something. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her clothes crisp, her movements gentle and careful. "Hey, you're home early," she said, turning with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She stepped forward and kissed his cheek. "I thought maybe we could have dinner together before I head out later." David returned the smile with just the right amount of warmth, careful not to overplay anything. "Sounds good," he said, his tone even, the picture of calm. Inside, his mind wasn't calm at all. It was structured, focused, bracing for what he already knew the evening would bring. She moved around the kitchen with unusual affection, touching his arm as she passed, offering him a soda, asking questions about his day she hadn't bothered asking in weeks. It was the kind of sweetness people use when trying to soften guilt, a sweetness meant to distract from whatever they hoped you wouldn't examine too closely. David played along. He answered her questions, asked a few of his own, nodded in the right places. Anyone watching them would have thought they were just a couple easing into their evening. No tension, no suspicion. Just two people in a kitchen dancing around unspoken things. After a light dinner, Mia dried her hands on a towel and cleared her throat. "I have a late private session tonight," she said, avoiding his eyes. "One of my long-term clients. He's leaving town soon, so he wanted to squeeze in an extra meeting." David nodded, casual, unbothered. "Do what you need to do." She relaxed a little too quickly. Then she grabbed her gym tote from the bedroom. David stood in the hallway doorway, watching her only through his peripheral vision to keep his expression neutral. She reached inside the bag to check her supplies, towels, wipes, water bottle, and then her hand wrapped around the sleek black bottle. The altered bottle. She didn't hesitate, didn't inspect it, didn't notice anything different. She simply slid it into the side pocket with the confidence of someone who had no reason to doubt what she was carrying. David felt a quiet pulse move through him. Not excitement, not satisfaction. Something sharper, more grounded. Confirmation that the plan was now fully in motion. "I'll be back late," Mia said, slinging the bag over her shoulder. "Don't wait up, okay?" He held her gaze for a second. "I won't." She left with a quick kiss to his cheek, one he didn't return, and then the front door shut behind her. A moment later, he heard her car start and fade down the street. David stood in the empty house, the silence spreading slowly through the rooms. He pulled out his phone and opened the connected smart home interface, the same one they'd installed 2 years earlier to make life easier. The app displayed real-time car tracking for safety reasons. Mia had insisted on it after her minor accident on I-35. Her icon moved steadily across the map. He watched it in stillness. She turned onto the main road, then downtown, then deeper, past the gym she claimed she'd be working at. The little blue dot stopped at a location he recognized only vaguely, an old recreation center that had been remodeled a few years ago. It boasted private rooms, rentable spaces, massage suites, yoga studios, everything someone might need for quiet evening sessions far from watchful eyes. David's jaw tightened. So that was where they went. Not hotels today, not discreet gyms. A recreation center with enough privacy to disappear inside for an hour without questions. He picked up his keys, grabbed his jacket, and walked to his car without hurried steps. He didn't want to arrive quickly. He wanted to arrive right. The drive downtown was steady, traffic thinning as the sun dropped behind the skyline. When he reached the area, he didn't pull into the center's parking lot. That would be too close, too obvious. Instead, he parked 2 streets over, beneath a tree that cast long shadows across the hood of his car. From that distance, he could see the building entrance, glowing faintly under the streetlights. Cars came and went, parents picking up kids from classes, couples heading to evening workouts, trainers hauling bags. But one car, her car, was already there. He settled back in his seat, engine off, watching the door, the lot, the movement around the building, waiting. Not for revenge, for truth to reveal itself, exactly as planned. David sat low in his car seat, half in shadow, eyes fixed on the recreation center entrance as the evening settled into a darker, cooler quiet. From this distance, he could see movement without being seen. People drifted in and out, most of them in gym clothes or carrying bags, normal, innocent. Until one man stepped into view who wasn't like the others. Ethan. He walked toward the doors with a confidence that rubbed against David's nerves like sandpaper. He wasn't in gym shorts today. He wore fitted joggers and a tight black shirt, sleeves pushed up to expose defined arms. Draped over one arm was a bundle of white towels. In his other hand, a small bag clinked faintly with the soft rattle of glass. Candles. David recognized the sound immediately. Mia liked candles. She said they set the tone. Ethan glanced around the parking lot once, casual but alert. Then he stepped inside. David's jaw tightened. The sight wasn't shocking. He already knew. But seeing it, watching the man carry towels and candles for his wife, it hit in a place deeper than anger, a quiet, heavy place that felt almost hollow. He waited 2 minutes before stepping out of the car. Not yet time to go in, but close enough to reposition. He crossed the street and moved to a bench near the recreation center's entrance, far off to the side, half hidden behind a large potted fern. Anyone looking quickly would think he was just another man waiting for someone to finish a class. The glass doors slid open again. This time, it was Mia. Her hair was curled, more than she ever curled it for him. She wore a soft mauve top and leggings, not her work uniform. Her tote bag hung from her shoulder, the black bottle clearly tucked into the side pocket. She looked around, just a casual scan, then brightened instantly when she spotted Ethan by the elevators inside. David leaned back on the bench, keeping his head turned just slightly away, but his eyes tracked every inch of the scene through the reflection in the glass. Mia walked toward Ethan with a warmth that cut like a blade. She placed her hand on his arm as she reached him. He grinned at her, that same smirk he'd used at the gym, except now it was softer, more intimate. They stepped into the elevator together. As the doors slid shut, David rose from the bench and moved closer, settling in a corner seat inside the lobby where trailing plants and a vending machine created natural cover, close enough to hear faint echoes, close enough to watch without being seen. Through the elevator's small window panel, he caught glimpses of their silhouettes. Mia leaned in, whispering something. He strained to catch the words, and then her voice drifted out, light, teasing. "Hope you're ready for one of our special oil nights." Ethan's laugh followed, loud enough to reach the lobby. "You know I love that stuff." The elevator dinged and carried them upward, disappearing from view. David didn't move. He didn't shake. He didn't even blink for a moment. His face remained cold, still, a mask carved in stone. But inside, he recorded every word, every tone, every gesture, like data in a machine. He needed it all, not for rage, but for clarity, for resolve. They were upstairs now, in a private room. The bottle was with them. The altered formula was already touching the air. The clock had started ticking. But David had learned something from engineering. You can't rush a reaction. You let it develop. You let it build. And then you watch it unfold exactly as you designed. He checked his watch. 2 minutes had passed. Then 5. Then 10. When 15 hit, David stood, stretching his back as if he were merely a man tired of sitting. When 19 passed, he walked toward the doors. At exactly 20 minutes, no earlier, no later, David stepped into the recreation center building. His footsteps echoed across the polished floor, steady, controlled. The front desk attendant barely looked up, used to people wandering in for classes or rentals. He moved with purpose, but not with haste. He knew where he was going. He knew what he was about to witness. And he knew that upstairs, behind a door that wasn't locked tight enough to hide the truth, the dye was beginning to wake up on their skin. David stepped deeper into the recreation center, the soft hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as he walked past the vending machines and informational posters pinned neatly along the walls. His footsteps echoed with quiet authority, each one measured, calm, almost too calm for a man claiming an emergency. But that was the point. Control, precision. The same precision he'd used his entire life, now repurposed for truth. The building manager sat behind a small desk near the elevator bank, an older man with glasses perched low on his nose. He looked up, slightly startled by David's purposeful stride. "Excuse me," David said, voice steady but laced with urgency. "I need to reach room 3B. My wife fainted." The manager jolted upright. She fainted, sir, are you sure? Did someone call down?" "No," David said quickly, leaning in just enough to sell the concern. "I tracked her here. She deals with low blood pressure. I think she might have blacked out. I can't reach her phone." The man's face drained of color. He fumbled for the intercom system. "Should I call emergency services?" David didn't hesitate. He gave a slow, heavy nod, the kind that conveyed both fear and responsibility. "Yes, please." This was the exact reaction he needed. Not dramatic, not loud, just enough to spark protocol, the kind that opened doors without questions. The manager's voice trembled as he pressed the radio button. "Security, we need access to the third-floor private rooms. Possible medical emergency in 3B. Repeat, medical emergency." A burst of static crackled, followed by a reply. "On our way." David stepped back, feigning restless worry. Inside, though, he felt only the steady hum of control. He had waited the perfect amount of time. By now, that altered oil would be warming under their bodies, reacting to sweat, beginning its silent bloom. The elevator doors slid open, and two staff members rushed out. They didn't waste time. They followed the manager toward the staircase. Elevators were too slow in emergencies. David joined them, climbing with a pace that looked worried but not frantic. He didn't want to outshine their urgency. Halfway up, he heard it. A faint echo. A thud. A muffled voice. Then another. Inside room 3B, Ethan and Mia were beginning to understand something was wrong. The hallway on the third floor was long, sterile, lined with identical doors. The staff hurried toward the middle, stopping at one marked with a small plaque. 3B, Private Wellness Suite. The manager pounded his fist against the door. "Hello? Can you hear me? Do you need help?" Inside, chaos erupted. A muffled shriek cut through the door, Mia's voice high and panicked. Ethan's deeper voice followed, sharp and frantic. Something clattered to the floor. Then fabric rustled violently, like two people scrambling for anything to cover themselves. David stayed several steps back, far enough not to draw attention, close enough to hear everything. Another shout burst out. Ethan this time. "What the? Why is it pink? Mia, why is your arm? Oh my—" More rustling, more scrambling. David imagined it clearly, the neon dye blooming across their skin in bright, humiliating streaks. The sheets staining instantly, the towels, the floor, every drop of sweat activating the chemical reaction. Every denied secret now glowing like a beacon. The manager knocked again, harder. "Are you all right? Open the door." No answer. Only more shuffling, more desperation. David caught Mia's voice through the chaos, breathless, trembling. "Don't open it. Don't. Ethan, help me scrub it off. It's getting brighter." Scrubbing wouldn't help. The dye only intensified with friction. Staff exchanged concerned glances. "Sir, we need to force entry," one of them told the manager. "Do it," the manager said, shaken. One staff member pulled out a master keycard and swiped it. The door beeped, but the latch didn't release. Someone inside was physically blocking it. "Step away from the door," the manager shouted. Inside, the panic grew louder. Something heavy scraped across the floor. Ethan's voice cracked. "Mia, God, it's all over us." David kept his face blank, a mask of a worried husband, but inside, a quiet stillness settled. Not satisfaction, not triumph. Just a stark confirmation that the truth was now impossible to hide. The staff member knocked again, this time with his fist, delivering 3 booming strikes that echoed through the hallway. "Last warning, we're coming in." Silence fell inside. Then, a thin, terrified whimper from Mia. David inhaled slowly. The reveal was coming. The truth was seconds away, and all he had to do now was stand there and let the door open. The wail of sirens cut through the evening air before David even saw the red lights reflecting off the hallway walls. The building manager rushed to meet the arriving fire department crew, waving them in with frantic urgency. David stepped aside as 3 firefighters in full gear hurried past him, their boots thudding heavily against the polished floor. "Third floor, room 3B, the manager said breathlessly. "Possible collapse or medical emergency. They're not responding properly." Not responding properly was one way to put it. The firefighters climbed the stairs with practiced speed, the metallic clatter of their equipment echoing up the stairwell. David followed several steps behind, his expression composed, unreadable. His pulse didn't quicken. His breath didn't shake. He'd designed this moment with precision. Now he simply watched it unfold. When they reached the hallway, the lead firefighter stepped forward and knocked on the door of 3B, his knuckles like a hammer striking steel. "Fire department? Anyone inside able to respond?" Silence. Then a muffled sound, a frantic shuffling, a half-strangled sob. It wasn't deliberate speech. It was panic leaking through the cracks. Inside, Mia's voice finally broke through, high and shaking. "No. Don't come in. Please, just give us a second." Her words were muffled by more commotion, towels dragging across skin, something bumping hard against furniture. The firefighter frowned. "Ma'am, we have a medical call. We need you to open the door." No answer, just Ethan's voice, ragged and frantic. It won't come off. Mia, it's spreading. My chest. Look at my chest. Then a cry of frustration. More scrubbing, more rustling. The dye was doing its job. Sweat accelerating the reaction. Heat activating the neon bloom. Every desperate motion only intensifying the color. Another firefighter leaned closer to the door, listening. Chief, I smell candles. Something's going on in there. The lead firefighter stepped forward again, voice firmer. Ma'am, sir, if you don't open this door, we will force entry for your safety. You have 10 seconds. Nothing. Just Mia's choked whimper. I can't let them see me like this. And Ethan's furious hiss. Just keep wiping. Keep wiping. David stood 30 feet back, arms folded across his chest, watching the scene with an expression so still it might as well have been carved into stone. Not triumphant, not emotional, simply present, witnessing. The firefighters moved into position. Stand clear, the captain ordered. Forced entry protocol. One firefighter braced a shoulder against the frame. Another prepared the Halligan bar, sliding its metal wedge into the narrow space near the lock. The first impact boomed through the hallway. As the doors slid shut, David rose from the bench and moved closer, settling in a corner seat inside the lobby where trailing plants and a vending machine created natural cover. Close enough to hear faint echoes, close enough to watch without being seen. Through the elevator's small window panel, he caught glimpses of their silhouettes. Mia leaned in, whispering something. He strained to catch the words, and then her voice drifted out, light, teasing. Hope you're ready for one of our special oil nights. Ethan's laugh followed, loud enough to reach the lobby. You know I love that stuff. The elevator dinged and carried them upward, disappearing from view. David didn't move. He didn't shake. He didn't even blink for a moment. His face remained cold, still, a mask carved in stone. But inside, he recorded every word, every tone, every gesture like data in a machine. He needed it all, not for rage, but for clarity, for resolve. They were upstairs now, in a private room. The bottle was with them. The altered formula was already touching the air. The clock had started ticking. But David had learned something from engineering. You can't rush a reaction. You let it develop, you let it build, and then you watch it unfold exactly as you designed. He checked his watch. 2 minutes had passed, then 5, then 10. When 15 hit, David stood, stretching his back as if he were merely a man tired of sitting. When 19 passed, he walked toward the doors. At exactly 20 minutes, no earlier, no later, David stepped into the recreation center building. His footsteps echoed across the polished floor, steady, controlled. The front desk attendant barely looked up, used to people wandering in for classes or rentals. He moved with purpose, but not with haste. He knew where he was going. He knew what he was about to witness. And he knew that upstairs, behind a door that wasn't locked tight enough to hide the truth, the dye was beginning to wake up on their skin. David stepped deeper into the recreation center, the soft hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as he walked past the vending machines and informational posters pinned neatly along the walls. His footsteps echoed with quiet authority, each one measured, calm, almost too calm for a man claiming an emergency. But that was the point. Control. Precision. The same precision he'd used his entire life, now repurposed for truth. The building manager sat behind a small desk near the elevator bank, an older man with glasses perched low on his nose. He looked up, slightly startled by David's purposeful stride. "Excuse me," David said, voice steady but laced with urgency. "I need to reach room 3B. My wife fainted." The manager jolted upright. She fainted? Sir, are you sure? Did someone call down?" "No," David said quickly, leaning in just enough to sell the concern. "I tracked her here. She deals with low blood pressure. I think she might have blacked out. I can't reach her phone." The man's face drained of color. He fumbled for the intercom system. "Should I call emergency services?" David didn't hesitate. He gave a slow, heavy nod, the kind that conveyed both fear and responsibility. "Yes, please." This was the exact reaction he needed. Not dramatic, not loud, just enough to spark protocol, the kind that opened doors without questions. The manager's voice trembled as he pressed the radio button. Security, we need access to the third-floor private rooms. Possible medical emergency in 3B. Repeat, medical emergency. A burst of static crackled, followed by a reply. On our way. David stepped back, feigning restless worry. Inside, though, he felt only the steady hum of control. He had waited the perfect amount of time. By now, that altered oil would be warming under their bodies, reacting to sweat, beginning its silent bloom. The elevator doors slid open, and 2 staff members rushed out. They didn't waste time. They followed the manager toward the staircase. Elevators were too slow in emergencies. David joined them, climbing with a pace that looked worried but not frantic. He didn't want to outshine their urgency. Halfway up, he heard it. A faint echo. A thud. A muffled voice. Then another. Inside room 3B, Ethan and Mia were beginning to understand something was wrong. The hallway on the 3rd floor was long, sterile, lined with identical doors. The staff hurried toward the middle, stopping at one marked with a small plaque. 3B, Private Wellness Suite. The manager pounded his fist against the door. Hello, can you hear me? Do you need help? Inside, chaos erupted. A muffled shriek cut through the door, Mia's voice high and panicked. Ethan's deeper voice followed, sharp and frantic. Something clattered to the floor. Then fabric rustled violently, like 2 people scrambling for anything to cover themselves. David stayed several steps back, far enough not to draw attention, close enough to hear everything. Another shout burst out, Ethan this time. What the? Why is it pink? Mia. Why is your arm? Oh my... More rustling, more scrambling. David imagined it clearly. The neon dye blooming across their skin in bright, humiliating streaks. The sheets staining instantly, the towels, the floor, every drop of sweat activating the chemical reaction, every denied secret now glowing like a beacon. The manager knocked again, harder. Are you all right? Open the door. No answer, only more shuffling, more desperation. David caught Mia's voice through the chaos, breathless, trembling. Don't open it! Don't! Ethan, help me scrub it off. It's getting brighter. Scrubbing wouldn't help. The dye only intensified with friction. Staff exchanged concerned glances. Sir, we need to force entry, one of them told the manager. Do it, the manager said, shaken. One staff member pulled out a master key card and swiped it. The door beeped. But the latch didn't release. Someone inside was physically blocking it. Step away from the door, the manager shouted. Inside, the panic grew louder. Something heavy scraped across the floor. Ethan's voice cracked. Mia, God, it's all over us. David kept his face blank, a mask of a worried husband, but inside, a quiet stillness settled. Not satisfaction, not triumph. Just a stark confirmation that the truth was now impossible to hide. The staff member knocked again, this time with his fist, delivering 3 booming strikes that echoed through the hallway. Last warning, we're coming in. Silence fell inside. Then, a thin, terrified whimper from Mia. David inhaled slowly. The reveal was coming. The truth was seconds away, and all he had to do now was stand there and let the door open. The wail of sirens cut through the evening air before David even saw the red lights reflecting off the hallway walls. The building manager rushed to meet the arriving fire department crew, waving them in with frantic urgency. David stepped aside as 3 firefighters in full gear hurried past him, their boots thudding heavily against the polished floor. 3rd floor, room 3B, the manager said breathlessly. Possible collapse or medical emergency. They're not responding properly. Not responding properly was one way to put it. The firefighters climbed the stairs with practiced speed, the metallic clatter of their equipment echoing up the stairwell. David followed several steps behind, his expression composed, unreadable. His pulse didn't quicken. His breath didn't shake. He'd designed this moment with precision. Now he simply watched it unfold. When they reached the hallway, the lead firefighter stepped forward and knocked on the door of 3B, his knuckles like a hammer striking steel. Fire department. Anyone inside able to respond? Silence. Then a muffled sound, a frantic shuffling, a half-strangled sob. It wasn't deliberate speech. It was panic leaking through the cracks. Inside, Mia's voice finally broke through, high and shaking. "No, don't come in. Please, just give us a second." Her words were muffled by more commotion, towels dragging across skin, something bumping hard against furniture. The firefighter frowned. "Ma'am, we have a medical call. We need you to open the door." No answer, just Ethan's voice, ragged and frantic. "It won't come off. Mia, it's spreading. My chest. Look at my chest." Then a cry of frustration. More scrubbing, more rustling. The dye was doing its job, sweat accelerating the reaction, heat activating the neon bloom. Every desperate motion only intensifying the color. Another firefighter leaned closer to the door, listening. "Chief, I smell candles. Something's going on in there." The lead firefighter stepped forward again, voice firmer. "Ma'am, sir, if you don't open this door, we will force entry for your safety. You have 10 seconds. Nothing. Just Mia's choked whimper. "I can't let them see me like this." And Ethan's furious hiss. "Just keep wiping. Keep wiping." David stood 30 feet back, arms folded across his chest, watching the scene with an expression so still it might as well have been carved into stone. Not triumphant, not emotional, simply present, witnessing. The firefighters moved into position. "Stand clear," the captain ordered. "Forced entry protocol." One firefighter braced his shoulder against the frame. Another prepared the Halligan bar, sliding its metal wedge into the narrow space near the lock. The first impact boomed through the hallway. From inside, Mia shrieked, a raw, terrified sound. Ethan cursed loudly. Something heavy toppled over, likely the massage table, now splashed with neon streaks. Second impact. The frame splintered. David remained still. Third impact. The door burst inward, hinges giving away with a loud wrench. The firefighters surged inside and immediately froze. Gasps erupted from every responder. Even the captain sucked in a sharp breath. The room was lit by dim candles, but it looked like someone had detonated a paint grenade. Neon pink splashed across the sheets, streaked across the floor, smeared on towels, smeared on bodies. The chemical light seemed almost to glow under the flickering candles. Mia was crouched on the floor, nearly naked, her body streaked in violent pink. Arms, torso, thighs, even parts of her face. She looked like someone dipped in fluorescent ink. Her eyes were wild, tear-glossed, desperate. She screamed as the door opened fully, covering herself with her arms. "Stop! Don't look at me! Don't! Please!" Ethan stumbled backward, also half covered in blazing color. He grabbed a towel and pressed it to his chest, but the dye had already soaked through in streaks. The more he wiped, the more the color flared, as if mocking his effort. "Sir, sit down," a firefighter ordered. "Both of you, sit down so we can evaluate you." "No, don't touch me," Ethan shouted, slipping on the staining sheets. "We're fine. We're fine." "You don't look fine," another firefighter muttered aloud, stunned despite his training. The sight was unforgettable. Humiliation incarnate. And in the hallway, David watched it all. His eyes didn't harden, they didn't soften, they simply observed, exactly as he planned, exactly as they deserved, exactly as the truth needed to be revealed. One firefighter turned toward the hall, scanning for the husband who made the emergency call. David stood motionless. And now, every eye in the hallway slowly began turning his way. The hallway transformed in minutes. What had been a quiet third-floor corridor now pulsed with footsteps, voices, and the unmistakable buzz of cell phones being raised, tilted, recorded. Tenants from nearby rooms peeked out first, curious about the fire department's arrival. Curiosity turned into shock the moment they caught sight of the neon-stained chaos inside room 3B. Gasps rippled down the hall. "Is that paint? What happened to them? Oh my God, look at the sheets." Someone muttered, "I'm recording this." And the chain reaction began. Screens lit up like a row of fireflies, each camera pointed toward the door where the fluorescent pink splashes bled outward into the hallway tiles. Inside the room, the scene was impossible to misunderstand. Neon dye streaked across the massage table, splattered onto the walls, pooled on the floor in wide, chaotic smears. It looked less like a wellness suite and more like the aftermath of a messy art explosion. except every splash told a story no one could excuse. Firefighters worked quickly. Professionalism stretched thin as they tried not to stare at the two nearly naked adults glowing in pink. Mia huddled against the far wall, arms wrapped across her chest, even though the dye covered her almost completely. She couldn't hide. Every inch the dye touched betrayed her. Ethan stumbled out first, the towel clutched tight at his waist, but the neon ran in jagged streaks across his arms, his neck, down his ribs, glowing even through the thin fabric of the towel. He tried to cover himself with his hands, but each movement only smeared the color more, the fluorescent brightness spreading like truth, refusing to stay contained. "Sir, we need you to keep your hands visible," a firefighter said, guiding him forward. I'm fine," Ethan stammered, eyes darting at the cameras, the phones held high, the horrified faces. This is some kind of chemical reaction. This isn't what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like. Two firefighters stepped back into the room to help Mia. She resisted at first, voice cracking. "Please, no, don't take me out there. Please, I can't." "Ma'am, we have to escort you so medical personnel can evaluate you," one of them said gently. "Everybody's filming," she cried. Her panic rang down the hall, a sharp sound that only drew more attention. More doors opened, more phones lifted. She finally allowed herself to be guided out, the towel wrapped around her body, doing little to cover the neon dye, blooming across her skin. Her legs, arms, even her collarbone, glowed in streaks that pulsed under the hallway lights. Tenants whispered to each other in stunned voices. "That's the gym instructor, isn't it? Who's the guy with her? What were they even doing in there?" The firefighters led them slowly toward the elevator, carefully navigating the crowd. Ethan kept his head down. Mia kept her eyes squeezed shut until something made her look up. David. He stood near the back of the hallway, leaning against the wall, arms still folded, face unreadable. He hadn't moved since the moment the door had been forced open. He hadn't stepped forward, hadn't spoken, hadn't reacted to the whispers or the stunned faces. He simply watched. When Mia's gaze landed on him, her entire expression broke apart. A single second was all it took. Shock, horror, guilt, understanding. Then, devastation. Her knees buckled slightly, and one of the firefighters steadied her. "David," she whispered, voice cracking under the weight of the truth coating her skin. He didn't answer, not with words, not with anger, not with pity. He didn't even twitch, just the steady, unblinking stare of a man who had finally seen everything he needed to see. Phones kept recording. Tenants kept staring. Ethan attempted to hide behind Mia's shoulder, but there was no hiding now. Not from the color, not from the cameras, not from the humiliation soaking through the hallway. David pushed away from the wall with calm, controlled precision. No rush, no dramatic exit. He simply turned, hands sliding into his pockets, and began walking toward the stairwell. He didn't look back, not once. Behind him, Mia's voice cracked into a sob, half plea and half despair. Ethan muttered something desperate under his breath. Firefighters continued guiding them toward the elevator, but David was already descending the stairs, the noise fading behind him, each step carrying him farther from the wreckage of the life he thought he had, and closer to whatever came next. By morning, the world had already seen them. David woke early, not because of rest. He hadn't truly slept, but because his phone buzzed endlessly on the nightstand, vibrating against the wood like a trapped insect. He ignored it at first, letting the gray dawn settle into the room. The house felt heavier, quieter than usual, a kind of silence that followed a storm. When the buzzing finally stopped, it started again 30 seconds later, then again, and again. He reached for the phone, not to check the calls, but to silence them. Before he could even touch the button, a notification flashed across the screen from a local Austin news outlet. Breaking. Neon couple rescued from Austin Rec Center. Video surfaces of bizarre wellness room incident. David exhaled, slow and steady. He hadn't sought publicity. He hadn't asked for anyone to record. But once the firefighters opened that door, the rest had been inevitable. People filmed what they couldn't understand, and nothing about that scene would ever look normal. Another notification. Then another. Viral. Pink affair goes wrong. Trending. Tag. Seek a neon nightmare. He placed the phone face down on the nightstand and swung his legs over the edge of the bed. His joints felt stiff, as if carrying the weight of truths finally set free. When he walked into the kitchen, sunlight streamed across the counter, gentle and indifferent. He poured himself coffee, listening to the quiet drip. Then the phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't news alerts. It was Mia. First a call, then a second, then a third. David let them ring out, untouched. He set the phone on the counter, screen glowing, name flashing. He watched it until the screen dimmed, then walked away. He didn't owe her panic. He didn't owe her comfort. He didn't owe her anything at all. The phone rang again. He didn't turn this time. By mid-morning, the calls slowed, then stopped completely. Silence returned, but it didn't last long. At 10:42 a.m., heavy knocking echoed across the living room. Not frantic, just firm, familiar. David opened the door to find his daughter, Laura, standing there with worry carved across her face. "Dad," she breathed out, stepping forward the moment he opened the door. "Are you okay? I've been calling since breakfast." David blinked. He hadn't checked the missed calls list. But Laura was here now, face pale, eyes searching his. She stepped inside before he even had a chance to invite her. "What happened? I saw something online, but I don't know if it's real." She paused, hesitating as if afraid to say the words. "Is Mom involved in that video?" David didn't flinch. He simply motioned for her to sit at the kitchen table. Then he picked up his coffee mug, taking a quiet sip, before lowering himself into the chair across from her. "Let me tell you what happened," he said. He told her everything, but calmly, without performance, without bitterness. He explained the missed anniversary, the receipts, the gym visit, the bottle, the messages, the recreation center. He explained how he'd called the emergency services protocol without ever laying a hand on either of them. He didn't embellish. He didn't dramatize. He told her the truth exactly as it happened. Laura listened without interrupting, hands clasped tightly in her lap. As he spoke, her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to heartbreak, then finally to anger, deep, fierce anger on his behalf. When he finished, the kitchen fell quiet. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator filled the space. Laura stood up so quickly, her chair scraped against the tile. She walked around the table and wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close. "Dad," she whispered, voice trembling, "you didn't deserve any of this." David closed his eyes for a moment, letting the hug settle against him. Her presence was an anchor in a sea that had felt too wide the night before. He hugged her back, but when he pulled away, his voice stayed level. "She burned the marriage," he said quietly. "Not me." Laura nodded, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "I know, and I'm staying with you through whatever comes next." David didn't need to respond. The weight in his chest eased just enough to let him breathe without effort. The phone buzzed again from the counter, another call from Mia, but David didn't look at it. He didn't move toward it. Laura noticed, her eyes narrowing. "Are you going to talk to her?" David shook his head once. "No," he said. "Not right now." And in the stillness of that moment, with sunlight spilling across the kitchen and Laura's steady presence beside him, he knew this was only the beginning, because Mia wouldn't stop calling, and he wasn't done deciding what came next. Late afternoon light filtered through the living room blinds, warm but muted, falling across the rug in long stripes. David sat in his usual armchair, elbows resting on the sides, the weight of the past 24 hours lingering in his bones. Laura had left an hour earlier, promising to check in again that evening. The house felt quiet now, quiet but not peaceful. He heard the knock before he saw the shadow move across the frosted glass of the front door. 3 short hits. Not angry, not demanding, hesitant. Then another, softer. David didn't move at first. He just breathed in, slow and steady. He already knew who it was. When he finally opened the door, Mia stumbled inside before he could even step back. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, strands stuck to the sides of her face. Her jacket was zipped unevenly, and her eyes, already swollen from hours of crying, flashed with a mixture of desperation and shame. But what struck David immediately were the faint pink stains still clinging to her skin. They'd faded, muted into soft patches along her jawline, her wrists, the side of her neck, but they were still there, like echoes of the truth. She closed the door behind her and turned toward him, chest trembling. David. Then her legs buckled. She fell onto the living room floor, palms hitting the rug before she collapsed fully, sobbing. "I messed up," she choked out. I messed up so badly." David didn't kneel, didn't reach out to help her up. He stood a few feet away, hands loosely at his sides, expression unreadable. She looked up at him from the floor, mascara smudged, tears streaking down her cheeks, her voice barely holding together. "I don't even know where to start," she said. "Everything's ruined, everything." David's voice came out low, steady. "Start with the truth." That single word, truth, made her face crumble even more. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving faint smears of pink dye across her cheek. "It wasn't supposed to be anything," she said. "Ethan, he made me feel seen. He flirted, he pushed, he said all the right things. I was stupid. I let myself believe him. He told me I deserved more attention, more appreciation, more fire." David raised an eyebrow slightly. "And you agreed." She swallowed hard. "I wasn't thinking straight. He pulled me in. He manipulated me. He kept telling me you were too old, too distant, that I was wasting my best years. I know it's wrong. I know it doesn't excuse anything, but I need you to understand that he twisted everything." David didn't blink. "You lied," he said quietly, consistently. Mia's breath hitched. I know I did, but I can fix it. I swear I can fix it. Just talk to me. Don't shut me out like this." He stepped past her, walking to the frame of the living room window. The distance wasn't large, but it felt like a chasm. He looked outside, the neighborhood calm, normal, untouched by the chaos in his home. "You didn't just lie," he said softly. "You built a second life, and you thought I'd never notice." Mia pushed herself upright, sitting on her knees, hands reaching toward him. "David, please don't throw away our life over this." Her voice cracked into a pleading whisper. "We have history, memories, a home. I know I hurt you. I know I did something unforgivable, but you can't just turn your back. We can get counseling. We can rebuild." He turned slowly to face her. For the first time since she arrived, he met her eyes fully, and there was no anger there, only clarity. A clarity cold enough to stop her mid-breath. "You want to talk about throwing something away?" David said. "You threw away our marriage long before last night." Mia shook her head frantically. "No, David, that's not true. It's not gone. It can't be." "It is," he said, "and you know it. You threw it away already." Her face collapsed again, shoulders shaking as another wave of tears broke through. She covered her mouth with trembling hands, muffling a sob. David didn't move toward her. He didn't offer her comfort. He didn't offer her anger. He simply watched her, the way a man watches the final moments of a story he never asked to be written. The silence stretched between them, thick, suffocating. Finally, Mia looked up, voice trembling through the tears. "What happens now?" David didn't answer immediately. He let the question hang in the air, unresolved, heavy, because the truth was, even he didn't know what came next. Not yet. And he wasn't going to decide it while she was still crying on the floor. David stepped into the Travis County Courthouse early, the morning light just beginning to spread across the marble floors. The building carried a coldness that had nothing to do with temperature, a formality, a weight, the feeling that decisions made inside its walls carried consequences that echoed for years. He walked with quiet certainty, a stack of temporary separation papers tucked under his arm, his breath steady. Laura walked beside him, her presence grounding. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. The simple act of standing with him spoke louder than anything she could have said. Mia arrived 10 minutes later. She didn't walk. She stormed. Her heels clicked aggressively against the courthouse floor, her hair pulled into a tight ponytail, her expression a mix of fear, fury, and humiliation. The last traces of pink dye were faint on her neck, barely visible unless you knew where to look. David noticed immediately. "David, what is this?" she demanded, voice already rising. "Temporary separation? You filed without even talking to me?" He looked at her calmly. "You asked what happens now," he said. "This is what happens." Her jaw dropped. "You're not serious. You can't be serious. You're going to just, what, throw me out? Destroy our marriage in front of the whole city?" David didn't flinch. "I'm formalizing what already happened." Mia's face went red, her voice sharpening. "You can't do this. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? That video, those headlines, my clients are already canceling. People are laughing at me." Laura stepped slightly closer to her father, a subtle show of support. Mia wasn't done. "And the money," she spat. "What am I supposed to do without access to our accounts? You think I can just start over? You think I can rebuild everything alone because you—" David cut her off with a calm, level voice. "You should have thought about that before." She blinked, stunned at the evenness of his tone. It wasn't hateful. It wasn't angry. It was simply final. A courthouse clerk called David's name. The three of them stepped forward to a small administrative window. David handed over the paperwork, each page crisp, neatly signed. The clerk stamped them, date and time, the dull thud of the stamp sealing what was left of the marriage. Mia's breath came sharper now, on the edge of a breakdown. "David, please, don't do this. Don't let this be the end. We can fix it. We can try therapy. We can—" Laura stepped in, voice quiet but firm. "Mom, stop." Mia turned on her, tears returning. "Stay out of this, Laura. You don't understand." "Oh, I understand," Laura said, her eyes steady. "I understand exactly what you put him through." Mia stared at her, stunned, speechless. The clerk handed David back a set of papers. "You're all set," she said. "This begins the 60-day separation period. After that, you can proceed with a formal divorce filing." David nodded, thanked her, and stepped back. But Mia stayed frozen. Her phone buzzed violently in her purse. She didn't want to look, David could tell, but the vibration kept going, sharp and insistent. Finally, she snatched her phone out, swiping it open. The color drained from her face. She turned the screen slightly, and David caught enough of the message preview to understand. "Ethan, this is your fault, all of it. I'm done. Don't contact me again." Her mouth trembled. She scrolled. More messages, angrier, colder, each one cutting deeper than the last. The man she had risked her marriage for was now discarding her like an inconvenience. Mia covered her mouth, eyes filling again. He's blaming me," she whispered. "He won't even talk to me." Laura shook her head. "What did you expect?" Mia's voice cracked. "I lost everything. Both of you." David didn't respond. He didn't need to. Her collapse wasn't his responsibility anymore. He stepped toward the exit, Laura at his side. Mia followed behind them for a moment, her footsteps dragging. But when David reached the courthouse doors, he turned, not to look at her, but to address the final practical matter. "You should pack a few things," he said. "The rest can be arranged later." Her chin quivered. "Pack? David, where am I supposed to go?" "You'll figure it out," he said. Not unkindly, not cruelly, just honestly. She stood there, shaking, watching him leave. An hour later, back at the house, David pulled out the suitcases from the hall closet. He placed them on the bed they once shared and began folding her clothes, quietly, methodically. Each item went in without sentiment, without hesitation. Just closure, piece by piece. He zipped the first suitcase shut, the sound sharp in the quiet room. And in that moment, he knew. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something much clearer, much stronger. And the next step was already forming in his mind. Mia's move-out happened on a gray Thursday morning, the sky heavy with low clouds that mirrored the mood inside the house. She arrived with a rented van, hair tied loosely, eyes swollen from nights of crying. She didn't speak much. She walked past David with her gaze lowered, picking up the suitcases he'd packed and placing them by the door, one by one. The silence between them wasn't hostile. It was simply emptied out. A silence that came after too many truths had crashed to the surface. Her new rental was only 10 minutes away, a tiny one-bedroom behind a strip mall wedged above a nail salon and a tax service office. David followed her there in his truck, not because she asked, but because he wanted this done cleanly. No lingering threads, no second interpretations, just closure, delivered quietly. When she unlocked the apartment door, the stale smell of old carpeting and dust rushed out. It wasn't a home. It wasn't even a fresh start. It was a landing spot after a fall she hadn't anticipated. She wheeled her suitcases inside and sat on the bare mattress, staring at the blank wall. David set the last box down near the kitchenette and stepped back, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Do you need anything else?" he asked, voice plain, neutral. She shook her head. "No." But then she looked up suddenly, as if the last thread of hope jerked inside her. "David, if we could just talk, really talk, maybe—" He stopped her with a simple shake of the head. "We've said everything that needed to be said." Her eyes glistened again, but this time she didn't let the tears fall. She just nodded, defeated. David walked out, closing the door behind him with quiet finality. He didn't hear her break down on the other side, but he knew it was happening. By evening, Mia was spiraling. She sat alone in the dim apartment, scrolling through her messages, her thumb shaking as she hovered over Ethan's name. She typed a long apology, deleted it, rewrote it, deleted it again. Finally, she sent a shorter version, voice trembling as she hit send. "Mia. Ethan, please, I need to talk. We can figure this out." The response came instantly. "Delivery failed. Recipient blocked you." She gasped, staring at the screen as if it had personally betrayed her. She tried again, switching to email. Undeliverable. She called, straight to voicemail. She called again. Same. Her breath hitched, her chest tightened. She clutched her phone like it was the last lifeline to the world she'd recklessly built and spectacularly lost. A sob escaped her throat, raw, involuntary. She curled on the mattress, shaking, alone with her choices. Every illusion shattered at once, and every door she tried to reopen was locked. While Mia unraveled in that dim apartment, David moved in the opposite direction. He spent the weekend cleaning the house top to bottom, not to erase her existence, but to reclaim the space. He boxed up old photos, reorganized the living room, scrubbed counters that had held too many quiet dinners filled with unspoken distance. Each small task cleared a bit more fog from his mind. He cooked actual meals for the first time in months, put on music he hadn't played since his 20s, sat on the back porch with a glass of iced tea, watching the sun dip behind the cedar trees. He didn't feel triumphant. He didn't feel vengeful. He just felt lighter, as if all the weight that had been pressing on him, doubt, suspicion, confusion, had finally slid off his shoulders. That Sunday evening, Laura arrived with a bag of groceries and a smile that told him she'd been worrying more than she admitted. She put the groceries away without asking, and then turned to him with a gentle firmness. "Dad," she said, "come stay at my place for a couple days. You shouldn't be here alone right now." David considered it, not because he felt fragile, but because he realized she needed as much reassurance as he did. "All right," he said. "A few days." Her face softened with relief. They drove to her apartment that night, a warm, lived-in space filled with framed art, soft blankets, and the faint scent of lavender. She made him tea. They talked. They didn't talk. Both felt natural. Later, as he lay on her couch under a soft throw blanket, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly in the dim light, he found himself sinking into deep reflection. Decades. Decades of loyalty, patience, quiet compromise. Decades of bending himself smaller to avoid conflict, of giving grace without receiving much in return, of assuming that steadiness was enough to hold a marriage together. He realized, painfully, that he had spent years shrinking so someone else could feel bigger, and he wasn't going to do that anymore. Not for Mia, not for anyone. He closed his eyes, letting that truth settle into his bones like a new foundation. Tomorrow, he promised himself, things would change again. Not because he needed revenge, but because he finally remembered his own worth. The Jazz Bar sat tucked between two newer buildings on a quiet Austin side street, its neon sign half burned out, buzzing faintly in the dusk. The Blue Lantern. David hadn't stepped inside in 30 years. Not since before marriage, before bills, before fatherhood, before routines replaced passions. The door looked smaller than he remembered, the windows darker, but the moment he approached, a faint tremor ran through him. Like his younger self was still standing somewhere behind those walls, waiting. He paused at the entrance, hand on the handle, breath catching in his chest. What was he doing here? He wasn't a young musician anymore. He wasn't the 28-year-old who played until 2 a.m., leaving with ringing ears and a happy heart. He was 62, tired, raw, newly separated. But something inside him refused to turn around. He pushed open the door. Warm brass music spilled into the night air, carrying the smell of old wood, whiskey, and nostalgia. The world inside was dim, smoky, alive. Tables were crowded with familiar silhouettes, older now, softer around the edges, but unmistakably the same crew he used to spend nights with. The stage was small, lit by a single soft spotlight, where a trio played a slow, wandering blues line. David stepped inside quietly, hoping to simply blend in. But he wasn't inside for more than 10 seconds before a voice cut through the music. "No damn way, David Cole." Heads turned. A tall man with silver dreadlocks and a wide grin pushed away from the bar. Marcus Boyd, trumpet player, old partner in crime, the man who'd once dragged David onto this very stage for an impromptu midnight set that lasted an hour. David blinked, stunned. "Marcus!" Marcus spread his arms. "Get over here, man!" The hug was immediate, warm, loud. A few other musicians recognized him and surrounded him with claps on the back, shaking his shoulder, laughing in disbelief. "Thought you disappeared off the face of the earth." "You still playing?" "Damn, man, you look good for 60-something. David laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in what felt like months. "I haven't touched a sax in years," he admitted. Marcus's grin only widened. "Well, tonight might be the night to fix that." The band finished their song, and the small crowd applauded. Marcus turned toward the stage and waved at the pianist, a younger woman with short curls and bright, curious eyes. "Karen, hold up," he called. "Got someone special tonight." Karen looked between Marcus and David, eyebrows raised. "Friend of yours?" "Old friend," Marcus said proudly. "Used to tear up this stage before any of you were even legal to drink." "Exaggeration," David muttered, but Marcus ignored him entirely. The pianist motioned him forward. "You want to join us for the next set?" David froze. He felt every insecurity stacked on his shoulders. Age, rustiness, grief still raw around the edges. "I don't know if I remember how to..." Marcus clapped a hand on his back. "Man, music doesn't forget you, even if you forget it." Someone behind the bar slid open a glass cabinet and pulled out a saxophone case, an old silver Selmer, vintage, polished lovingly. "This still yours, Cole?" the bartender asked. David's breath caught. His mouth fell open slightly. "You kept that?" "You left it here during that storm in '93 and never came back for it," the bartender said with a shrug. "Figured one day you'd return." The room quieted, waiting, watching him. David stepped toward the case, fingers trembling slightly as he touched the latches. When he opened it, the sax gleamed softly in the dim bar lights, like an old friend waking from a long sleep. He lifted it slowly, heavier than he remembered, familiar in every way that mattered. "You sure?" Karen asked gently from the piano bench. David swallowed hard. "Let's see what's left." He stepped onto the stage. The crowd murmured in anticipation. He adjusted the strap, brought the sax to his lips, and inhaled. Karen counted them in. 1, 2, 3. David blew the first note. It wavered, then steadied, then bloomed. Pain flowed first, deep, old, carved from betrayal and memory. Then pride, warm, rising, shaped by survival. And somewhere beneath it all, the young man he used to be unfurled his arms and stepped into the light. He played not with perfection, but with soul. Every note told his story. The missed dinners, the quiet sacrifices, the betrayal, the silence, the truth, the loss, the reclaiming, the rediscovery, the rebuilding. Karen watched him with awe. Marcus tapped in on trumpet, weaving around David's lines like they'd never stopped playing together. The drummer caught fire. The bassist grounded everything with a pulsing, steady heartbeat. When they hit the final note, the room erupted. Applause thundered through the bar. People stood, cheered, whistled. Marcus whooped loud enough to shake the glasses behind the counter. Someone yelled, "Welcome back, Cole." David lowered the sax slowly, breath shaking, his heart pounding with something he hadn't felt in years. Life. He smiled, wide, real, unguarded. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't a betrayed husband or a quiet man carrying too much weight. He was himself, a musician, a man reborn. As the applause faded and the lights dimmed again, Marcus leaned toward him with a grin. "We're playing a late set in an hour. You sticking around?" David looked at the sax in his hands, then at the stage, then at the open room full of possibility. "Yeah," he said softly, "I'm not done yet." And in that moment, the next chapter of his life stretched open, waiting for him to step fully into it. Mia wasn't looking for the video. She wasn't looking for anything at all, really. Most of her days had dissolved into long stretches of silence in that cramped apartment. Meals she didn't finish, hours she spent staring at the wall, a phone she kept checking even though no one was calling. But on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, while scrolling aimlessly through social media, a clip flashed across her feed. Local jazz bar revival, older sax player brings down the house. She almost kept scrolling, until the frozen thumbnail made her breath hitch. David. Her fingers trembled as she tapped the video. The clip opened with warm lighting, the soft glow of the Blue Lantern stage, and the sound of applause fading as the musicians prepared for their next set. Then, in the center of the frame, stood David, saxophone in hand, shoulders relaxed, eyes closed, as he waited for the count-in. He looked different, lighter, freer. Younger, somehow. Mia leaned forward, watching as he lifted the sax to his lips and played, notes smooth and soulful, pouring out of him like something long buried, had finally clawed its way to the surface. The audience in the video cheered, clapping wildly when he finished. Someone behind the camera shouted, "Play another one!" And David laughed, a genuine, unforced laugh she hadn't heard in years. She swallowed hard, unable to look away. This was the man she had married, the man she had underestimated, the man she had slowly, quietly neglected. Only now, with distance and humiliation pressing on her like a weight, did she realize she never truly knew him, not the man he used to be, not the man he became, and certainly not the man he was becoming now. Her chest tightened as she replayed the clip, watching him smile, watching him enjoy himself, watching the world applaud him in a way she never had. A fragile whisper escaped her throat, something between regret and grief. Without thinking, she opened their old message thread. The thread she had abused with excuses, cancellations, little lies, meant to keep him at arm's length while she built something reckless elsewhere. Her fingers hovered for a long time. Then she typed, "You look happy." She stared at the message for several seconds, debating whether to send it. But her emotions overrode her pride, and she pressed send before she could convince herself otherwise. The moment the message went through, her heart thudded, hard and uneven. She waited, breath shallow, staring at the read receipt, as if it could heal something inside her. When the 3 dots appeared, David typing, her pulse quickened. His reply was short, plain, uncomplicated. "I am." Mia felt the words hit her like a punch to the chest. She covered her mouth, a sob slipping out despite her effort to hold it back. He wasn't being cruel. He wasn't trying to punish her. He was simply being honest. He was happy, without her. She locked her phone and pressed it against her forehead, letting tears slip down her cheeks in quiet streaks. It was the clearest confirmation yet that she had destroyed something irreplaceable, something she could never rebuild. Across town, life wasn't sparing Ethan either. News had spread fast around his gym. The staff tried to remain professional, but whispers always traveled through locker rooms faster than disinfectant sprays. His manager called him in for a performance review, though everyone knew what it was really about. He left the office with a termination letter in hand and a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The official reason was violation of professional conduct standards. But the subtext was written across every glance he received on the way out. The pink dye fiasco, the viral humiliation, the bad press. He tried calling Mia, hoping to blame her, hoping for anger to outweigh his embarrassment. But she didn't answer, not because she refused to, but because she couldn't bear to hear the voice of the man who abandoned her when everything imploded. He tried the gym next door. They turned him away. Other places never called him back. A scandal like his didn't fade in a city like Austin. It replayed itself endlessly in group chats, on forums, in memes. He became a walking consequence. Meanwhile, Mia continued losing clients one by one. Some were polite, claiming schedule changes. Others were blunt, telling her they didn't want to risk being involved in whatever that pink disaster was. Screenshots of the video circulated among her fitness circles. Parents whispered about her at kids' classes. Couples avoided booking with her. Humiliation followed her everywhere. Her calendar, once full, now sat empty. Her bank account dwindled. Her hope dissolved. And one night, when the fluorescent lights in her apartment buzzed too loudly, when the silence pressed too tightly, when the loneliness weighed too heavily, she sat on the edge of her bed and whispered to the quiet room, "I ruined everything." She buried her face in her hands and let herself fall apart, grief swallowing her in wave after wave. She had lost Ethan. She had lost David. She had lost her reputation. She had lost the life she'd taken for granted. But the worst realization wasn't that she'd lost everything. It was that David had moved on, fully, peacefully, beautifully, and she was stuck exactly where her choices had led her, at rock bottom. And for the first time, she understood. There was no climbing back into the life she had ruined, not when the man she betrayed had already begun building something brighter without her. The park was quiet that afternoon, the kind of quiet that comes after the morning joggers have gone home and before the evening crowd wanders in. A soft breeze stirred the branches of the oak trees, scattering sunlight across the path in broken patches. David sat on a bench overlooking the pond, hands folded loosely, watching ducks ripple the still water. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't tense. He felt resolved. He heard footsteps behind him, slow, hesitant. He didn't turn until she spoke. "David." Mia stood a few feet away. She looked smaller somehow, as though the past weeks had drained the brightness from her. Her shoulders were rounded, her hair pulled back in a simple tie, her clothes plain. The remnants of her old self, the confident instructor, the woman who once commanded every room, were gone. "Can I sit?" she asked quietly. David nodded. "Of course." She took the bench beside him, leaving a respectful distance. For a moment, neither spoke. Birds chirped softly overhead. A jogger passed in the distance. Life went on around them, indifferent to the weight in the air. Finally, Mia inhaled shakily. "Thank you for meeting me." David nodded again. "You said you wanted to talk." She clasped her hands in her lap, fingers twisting nervously. "I do, and I'm not here to fight or blame or make excuses. I'm not even here to beg for anything." She paused, voice trembling. I need to apologize. Really apologize." He didn't interrupt. He kept his eyes on her, calm and steady. Mia swallowed hard. "I hurt you. Terribly. And not just once. Not in one moment. I hurt you over months, maybe years, without thinking about what that was doing to you. I lied. I hid things. I created a version of myself that wasn't fair to you, or to us." Her voice cracked. "There's no excuse for that." David let the words settle, not rushing to respond. She continued, tears gathering at her lashes. "I've had a lot of time to think. Too much time. And all I can say is, I'm sorry. Deeply sorry. For everything." David nodded slowly, accepting the words without absorbing them. "Thank you for saying that," he said softly. Mia wiped her cheek. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. And I'm not asking for it. I needed you to hear the truth from me. Without lies. without defenses. He appreciated that. He really did. But he felt no shift inside, no pull toward reconciliation, no lingering spark. The apology was genuine, and yet it changed nothing. They sat in silence again until Mia finally exhaled, long and shaky. "Can I ask you something?" she whispered. "Of course." She looked down at her hands. "Why the dye?" Her voice broke with a mix of pain and curiosity. "Why something so dramatic?" David took a breath and lifted his eyes toward the pond, watching a pair of ducks glide across the water. His answer came slowly, without anger, without bitterness. "To show you the truth," he said quietly, "the way you showed it to me, in color." Mia's eyes widened. She looked at him, truly looked, at the steadiness in his posture, the calm in his voice, the absence of rage she expected to find, but didn't. He continued, his tone gentle but firm. "You kept me in the dark for a long time. You gave me fragments, half-stories, excuses. I had to piece things together in shadows. That dye? It wasn't revenge. It wasn't cruelty." He paused. "It was clarity, a way to see everything clearly, so I could stop doubting myself." Mia's lip trembled. You think I deserved that humiliation?" David shook his head. "I think the truth deserved daylight. That's all." She looked away, blinking rapidly as fresh tears slipped down her cheeks. She took several long breaths before speaking again. "I realize something now," she said softly. "You're already gone, not physically, but here." She touched her hand to her chest. "You've moved on, haven't you?" David didn't hesitate. "Yes." The word didn't hit like a punch. It landed softly, cleanly, final, in the gentlest way possible. Mia closed her eyes, letting the reality wash over her. When she opened them again, she looked older, not in a physical sense, but stripped of illusions, stripped of denial. "I won't fight you anymore," she whispered. "I won't drag this out or try to hold on to something that's already broken." She inhaled deeply. "If you want a divorce, I'll sign whatever you put in front of me." David nodded, his expression warm but distant. "Thank you." They both sat quietly for a moment, the weight finally lifting from the space between them. A duck dove beneath the surface of the water. Children laughed in the distance. The world carried on. Mia stood first. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and forced a small, trembling smile. "I hope, someday, you find happiness again." David rose, hands in his pockets. "I already have parts of it." She nodded, accepting that truth even though it hurt. Then she turned and took a slow step down the path. Before she rounded the corner, she glanced back one last time. David didn't wave. He didn't look away either. He simply held her gaze with quiet understanding. And when she was gone, the bench beside him empty, David took a long breath, steady, grounded, because the final conversation was over. And the next step in rebuilding his life was waiting. The courthouse felt different this time. No tension, no shouting, no echoes of blame bouncing off the stone walls. Just a quiet stillness, the kind that settles when two people finally accept the truth instead of trying to outrun it. David arrived early, dressed simply, dark slacks, a clean button-down, no tie. He carried only a folder under his arm, the finalized divorce papers inside. The receptionist at the family division greeted him with a soft nod, recognizing him from weeks earlier. He returned the gesture, then took a seat near the window, sunlight warming the floor around his feet. Mia arrived 5 minutes later. She walked slowly, as if every step required effort. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, her hair pulled back neatly, her clothes modest. She didn't make a scene. She didn't rush toward him or attempt small talk. She simply sat in the chair across from him, leaving 2 empty seats between them, a respectful distance, a quiet acknowledgement of everything that had happened. When the clerk called their names, they followed her into a small administrative room, fluorescent lights humming, a stack of legal forms neatly placed on the table. The clerk walked them through each page: asset division, temporary support arrangements, the formal dissolution timeline. Everything was clear. Everything had been agreed upon in advance. There was no fighting left, no bargaining, no salvage attempt, just finality. David picked up the pen first. His hand didn't shake. He signed each page with steady strokes, the ink sinking into the paper like a seal on a chapter already lived, processed, and closed in his heart. When he finished, he slid the papers across the table. Mia stared at them for a moment. Her breath hitched, almost imperceptibly, before she lifted the pen. Her signature came slower, more hesitant, like her hand kept trying to resist the movement. But she signed, every page, every line, until there were no more lines left. The clerk gathered the papers with polite efficiency. "I'll file these today. The divorce will be finalized as scheduled." David nodded. "Thank you," Mia whispered, barely audible. "Thank you as well." With that, it was done. They stepped out into the hallway together but didn't walk out side by side. David moved with calm purpose toward the exit. Mia lingered near the wall, hands folded in front of her, eyes glistening but controlled. She didn't chase after him. She didn't call his name. She simply watched. David reached the double doors at the end of the hall, pushed them open, and stepped into a burst of warm Austin sunlight. The air outside felt different, fuller, clearer, almost new. He paused for a breath, letting warmth wash across his face. For the first time in a long time, he felt weight lifting, not suddenly, but steadily, rising off his shoulders like mist. Laura was waiting for him at the bottom of the courthouse steps. The moment she saw him, she walked forward with open arms. He didn't realize how much he needed that hug until he felt her arms wrap around him, firm and grounding. "Dad," she whispered, "I'm proud of you." David exhaled into her shoulder, the last pieces of strain finally easing. "Thank you," he murmured. She pulled back, smiling through her own emotion. "No, really, I mean it. You handled all of this with more grace than most people ever could." David looked at her, eyes softening, not with sadness, but with something lighter, something closer to peace. "I'm proud of me too." They shared a quiet moment, standing in the sunlight, the courthouse behind them and the world ahead. Up at the top of the steps, Mia finally stepped outside. She didn't come down. She leaned against the railing, watching David and Laura walk toward the parking lot together. Her face crumpled, not dramatically, not loudly, but with a quiet devastation that came from realizing she had finally lost something she would never get back. A good man. She whispered it under her breath, her voice breaking as the truth settled into her bones. "I lost a good man." David didn't hear her, and even if he had, it wouldn't have changed his path. Without turning back, without hesitation, he continued walking with Laura, moving forward into the next chapter of his life, one step at a time, sunlight warm on his back, leaving the past behind him for good. David carried the last moving box into his new apartment, just as the late afternoon sun dipped behind the skyline. The place wasn't large, just a clean, open one-bedroom on the 12th floor, but it had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over downtown Austin. From his balcony, he could see the river, the bridges, the glow of restaurants, and the flicker of city life rising toward the evening. It wasn't the house he'd built with Mia. It wasn't filled with memories, or ghosts, or old routines. It was fresh, unwritten, his. He placed the box on the counter and took a slow walk through the apartment, inhaling the scent of new paint and untouched beginnings. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of space. Not physical space, but emotional. A quiet spaciousness in his chest that let him breathe deeper. He exhaled slowly. This was home now. Friday night came quickly, and with it, another jazz session at the Blue Lantern. The bar buzzed with warm energy when David stepped inside, saxophone case in hand. Marcus spotted him instantly, raising his trumpet in greeting. "Cole, about time you showed up," he called across the room. David took his place on stage like he'd never left it, settling into the familiar curve of the sax against his side. The band welcomed him easily, like he was part of the furniture, part of the family. When the lights dimmed and the first note rang out, David felt his spirit rise with the sound. Every weekly set became less about reclaiming the past and more about stepping into the man he was meant to be all along. He played with soul, with gratitude, with a freedom he didn't know he'd been longing for. The crowd leaned in every time, cheering louder with each performance, and when the final song faded, David always left the stage feeling lighter than he'd entered it. As the weeks rolled on, something else happened, something he never expected. Old friends began drifting back into his life, men he used to play gigs with, neighbors he'd lost touch with when Mia's schedule always came first, co-workers he hadn't grabbed coffee with in years. They reached out, they met for lunch, they attended his jazz sets, they talked about life, regrets, dreams, aging, and starting over. And with every conversation, David realized just how much of himself he had set aside during the marriage. Not intentionally, not cruelly, just slowly, bit by bit, shrinking around someone else's needs until he barely recognized the shape of his own life anymore. Now, he was expanding again, growing back into himself. Laura visited often, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just to check in, sometimes simply because she liked the view from his balcony. They sat outside together with cups of tea, watching the lights glitter across the water. Their bond, already strong, became something deeper. Not just father and daughter, but allies, friends. Two people who had walked through fire and found each other on the other side. One night she said, "You look peaceful, Dad." He smiled. "I feel peaceful." She squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with quiet pride. At the jazz bar, younger musicians began gravitating toward him. College students, newcomers, kids carrying secondhand horns and more passion than technique. They asked him questions, watched him rehearse, admired his tone, his phrasing, his patience. One evening, a nervous freshman approached him after a set. "Mr. Cole, sir, do you teach lessons?" David laughed softly. "I do now." Soon he was mentoring a handful of them each week, teaching breath control, improvisation, storytelling through music. They reminded him of himself at their age, hungry, hopeful, raw. Their enthusiasm sparked something warm inside him, something he didn't know he'd missed. He discovered joy in the routine of it. Morning coffee on the balcony, afternoon lessons, evening rehearsals, late-night jazz. Everything fit. Everything flowed. Everything made sense. And somewhere along the way, quietly, almost without noticing, David began sleeping through the night again. No jolting awake, no heavy thoughts, no empty ache beside him. Just steady breathing, the soft hum of the city, and the comfort of a mind finally at rest. The life he was building wasn't dramatic or grand. It was simple, real, his. And for the first time in decades, David Cole felt something settle fully into place. Peace. The summer festival lights glowed against the dusk sky, warm and golden, casting long reflections across the river. Hundreds of people filled the open-air venue. Families on blankets, couples leaning into each other, groups of friends holding cold drinks and laughing over the music drifting from the main stage. Austin thrived on nights like these, and tonight, the city felt alive in a way David hadn't experienced in decades. Backstage, he warmed up quietly, fingers gliding over the sax keys, his breath steady and practiced. He wasn't nervous, not exactly. More humbled, surprised that life had brought him here again, to a stage, to a festival, to a moment he never thought he'd reclaim. "5 minutes, Mr. Cole," a stagehand said. David nodded, wiping the mouthpiece, feeling its familiar weight settle comfortably into his grip. The late evening air was warm, carrying hints of barbecue smoke and river breeze. The murmurs of the crowd rose and fell like waves. He stepped toward the side of the stage and paused to take in the scene. An entire lawn of faces, spotlights cutting through the dark, the stage glowing with color. And for the first time in years, maybe longer, David felt something inside him click into place with absolute certainty. This was where he belonged. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Austin's own David Cole." Cheers erupted across the festival grounds. David walked out into the lights, the sax warm in his hands, his heartbeat steady. The applause washed over him, loud, electric, real. He didn't shrink under it. He didn't look for permission to exist in the space. He stepped into it fully. Under the lights, he closed his eyes for a moment and inhaled deeply, letting the air fill his chest. The microphone picked up the faint metallic click of his keys as he tested the first note. What he didn't see, what he couldn't know, was the figure standing at the back of the crowd. Mia. She stood in the shadows near a cluster of food tents, partly hidden behind the glow of hanging lanterns. She hadn't planned to be here. She'd seen the festival announcement online. She'd seen his name on the lineup. She told herself she wouldn't go, but she did. She didn't push forward, didn't try to get near him. She stayed behind everyone, hands clasped, watching him with an expression lined with regret and an ache she knew would never leave. She wasn't here to interrupt his life. She was here to witness what her choices had forced her to lose. Back on stage, David lifted the sax to his lips. The lights warmed his face. The crowd hushed in anticipation. The first note rose into the night, smooth, soulful, deep, a single thread of sound cutting through the summer air. Then the next, and the next. He played a piece he'd written quietly over the last few months, something personal, something honest, something rooted in everything he'd endured. Notes that carried grief, then healing, betrayal, then truth, loss, then renewal, pain, then peace. It wasn't a song about her. It wasn't a song for her. It was a song for himself, a dedication to freedom, to rediscovery, to the man he'd fought his way back to. His fingers moved with confidence, each phrase flowing into the next. The sax responded to him like it had been waiting all these years. The melody climbed and broke open, soaring into the air above the festival grounds. People in the audience leaned forward, some closing their eyes as the music washed over them. Mia felt her chest tighten. The music was beautiful, and she knew, with painful clarity, that she had never truly known this version of him. She watched from a distance, unseen, as the man she betrayed stood in the spotlight, finally whole again. On stage, David opened his eyes during the final run. He saw the crowd standing now, faces lit with admiration. He saw glow sticks in the air, phone lights held up, people swaying, moved in a way he hadn't expected. And just before the last note left his sax, he did something he hadn't done in years. He smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile, warm, wide, and free. The final note lingered in the air like a promise, fading slowly as the crowd erupted into applause, louder than anything he'd heard since he was young. Cheers rolled across the lawn like thunder, people rising to their feet in a full standing ovation. David lowered the sax, breathing deeply as the applause washed over him. He bowed, steady, grounded, grateful. At the back of the crowd, Mia lifted a hand to her mouth, her eyes shining with tears she didn't wipe away. But David didn't see her. He didn't need to. He stepped back from the mic, turning toward the stage exit, not hesitating, not lingering, not looking back. He walked forward, the applause still roaring behind him, each step carrying him into the next chapter of his life. A life finally, fully, unquestionably his own.